4 practices are in the books for Alabama. What have we learned so far?
You are Locked On Bama, your daily podcast on the Alabama Crimson Tide. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back into Locked On Bama, AHSA's radio network. Luke Robinson, that's me. And Bama Online's Jimmy Stein, that's him. Thank you, FanDuel, for being a sponsor. And thank you, everydayers, for joining us every day. We got a lot to discuss today. We're going to talk about Alabama going into full pads tomorrow. Yes. Also, going to take you back to the very famous 2008 Alabama signing class because you know what? It's come up a little bit lately talking about InState Recruiting. We're going to talk about that. Also, now we're going to talk about what we've learned from practice so far. Jimmy has been to all 4 practices. And, one thing that I'm gleaning from this is that the coaching staff feels very good about Jalen Milroe. Again, I mentioned this yesterday. The word energy is repeated over and over and over again. Can that energy be sustained is going to be interesting because, it's very easy to have energy. It's sort of like being in a new relationship. At first, yeah, if she calls or he calls or whatever, yeah, you're available. Yeah, I can go whenever. We can go to the movies. We can go to your house. We can go to your parents' house, whatever.
We can Netflix and chill. That's what the kids do.
Yeah.
They Netflix and chill.
Netflix and chill. Yeah.
We missed this by about 3 or 4 generations, me and you.
6 months in, you're like, yeah, sure. Thai food, I don't care. Chinese, doesn't matter. Mexican, we'll go to wherever you want. I don't care. Just quit talking to me. But so let's see.
I don't even have Netflix.
I'm
not even going to Hulu and chill.
So what have you learned from practice, Jimmy? What's the biggest thing that stood out?
Well, biggest thing that stood out. That's, I would say in a macro sense, just the overall mood. I think I described yesterday on the show that it feels like high school practice, and that's obviously got this terrible connotation that people run with the wrong way. I just simply mean in terms of energy. The kids are very excited to be out there. I mean, it's an excited time, and there is a lot of energy. Some of it's the music probably, but there's just a general overall excitement to be out there. It's not a business as usual thing. You can sense the newness. I think a lot of it is the youthful staff. A lot of these staff members like Jamarcus Shepard and Brian Ellis, on the offensive side of the ball, they are young guys. Nick Sheridan, the OC, he's a young guy. Kane Womack, the DC, he's a young guy. To say nothing of Freddie Roach and Colin Hitchler. Even Mo Linguist isn't an older coach. I mean, this is a young staff. With young energy. Now, in terms of what we've learned, 4 practices, none in pads. I can't say that there's this ton of headline-making bombs being dropped, but I do think there is something to learn almost from each position group. Like, for instance, maybe it's a minor thing, but at quarterback, Jalen's 1 and Ty's 2. I think that it's pretty apparent from the way they line up in drills that Austin Mack is 3rd and Dylan Lonergan's 4th. That's news. I don't think that's how we thought this spring and summer it might line up. And let me tell you why that's imperative, Luke, is both Austin Mack and Dylan Lonergan are in the same class. They're not separated at all. They're both redshirt freshmen. So I would think that it's fair that both of them view each other as a barrier to playing time. Right? I mean, like, hey, for Austin and Dylan, they're like, hey, my turn will come eventually because Milroe's going to cycle out. Even Ty's going to cycle out, and I'll still be here. But Austin Mack and Dylan Lonergan will be there together in the same group. So I do think it's important that they're already in some level of competition because that competition is sort of important because I think we all believe after Milroe leaves, Ty will be the quarterback. But then after Ty leaves, will it be Austin or Dylan or maybe Keelan Russell who shows up in January? But anyway, the whole point to that is Austin Mack appears to be ahead of Dylan Lonergan right now. That could change before fall camp's over. And lastly, I'll just touch about running backs. And this is kind of weird. I'm sure it's by design, but it sure seems like Justice Haynes and Jam Miller take turns day to day being the number 1 back. Some days it looks like Jam, other days it looks like Justice. It's never been anyone else. They're always at the head of the line, 1 and 2 or 2 and 1. And personally, I don't think it matters a lot because I think if there's basically 30 carries to hand out to the main running backs in a game, I think they're both going to get around 15. regardless of who takes the first snaps. I think they're both going to play substantial minutes. So, but it is interesting that they do switch out. I thought in the fourth practice, yesterday's Sunday practice, Justice was number one. He was the one working with Jalen Milroe when they were working on the handoffs, and they also worked on quarterbacks throwing to the backs. Jalen was throwing it to Justice, and Ty was throwing it to Jam.
It just so happened that last night the Washington-Texas game was on, and as well as Washington-Michigan. Now, I didn't stay up for Washington-Michigan, but I watched a lot of the end of the Washington-Texas game, and all I could do was think about how this offense with Alabama's weapons can be deadly. Now, they did not play well in the fourth quarter. Cuevas actually recovered the onside kick from Texas, by the way.
Interesting.
That probably should have ended the game, but Washington had a player get hurt. If you remember, they were forced to take a timeout.
So it's cool that he's like the third tight end, but he's on the hands team.
Yeah, that's kind of cool. And they did throw to the back a pretty good bit. And one thing that I noticed, there was one play that was going to happen in that game. Again, this is not necessarily relative to this practice, but I just found it interesting. They were going to have a throwback pass to Penix and let him take off. Can you imagine a throwback to Milroe and then him becoming like a super fast tight end? I mean, that'd be incredible. I'd love to see that play. But going back to practice for a second, is there anything, what have you noticed special teams wise? I've seen no talk.
Right.
Of like who could be the returner. We know the punter, we know the kicker, right? But I hadn't seen anybody talk about punt return, kick return, all that stuff.
That's because we haven't seen any of it. I mean, literally none of it.
Makes sense.
For there's several fields that they work on at a time, and the media is only allowed in a certain part of the area. The special teams groups work on really what amounts to field 4. Which is almost beyond our view entirely. And we haven't really seen it. And they haven't worked on it as a group in front of us. Now, they probably work on special teams, I'm certain, every single day. Keep in mind, there's about roughly 30 periods in a practice. We see 4, maybe 5 or parts of a 5th one. And there's about 30 different practice periods out there. So we just haven't been there for that. Rest assured, they're working on it, but we haven't seen it. I will say this, though, that was just interesting. When we walked in the building on Sunday, we have to get through to the outside practice field. We walked through the indoor practice field on the way to the outdoor. That's the way they lead the media through. And we had to walk around the special teams guys because they were doing drills, stretching drills, and leg drills where they were using the hurdles from the track and field team. They literally had the hurdles that the track and field team uses in the indoor, and they were walking and stretching their legs up and over the hurdles that the track team uses, the kickers and the punters doing it while the strength and conditioning staff watched and kind of coached them through it. So I thought that was just kind of interesting, but there wasn't a football involved. I mean, they're just kind of stretching their legs, but we did see Graham Nicholson and Connor Talty and James Burnip. And by the way, Kalen DeBoer, after his press conference, for those that didn't hear it, he mentioned how Graham Nicholson had looked. I don't know that he used the word fantastic, but it was clearly a good word to describe what he said. I believe he was basically saying that Graham hasn't missed. When Kalen DeBoer has been watching, he hasn't even missed. And Kalen DeBoer was sort of bragging on him. But then Kalen went out of his way to mention, and Burnip is punting well, and Connor Talty's kicking it good, which is not something we heard during the spring. So I think Connor Talty may have used this motivation of, hey, they had to bring in a kicker because you weren't ready. And maybe Connor Talty has taken some steps forward in his development, which is great because Graham Nicholson is a one-and-done player. He'll be out of eligibility after this upcoming season. Oh, you're muted. It's fall camp. It's fall camp. People,
it is fall camp. Look,
people expect that.
Deep, baby.
Yeah. People expect that.
All right. Zach Blackerby and I did a locked on crossover. Zach Blackerby of Locked on Auburn. And it created a stir, especially within the Auburn community, talking about in-state recruiting. And you know what? One thing that everybody harkens back to is that very famous 2008 Alabama class. And we're going to revisit that for a second because I found something interesting. But of course, now I'm going to tell you about eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience, the formula for winning championships. It's also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance, superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered with over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die. You always find exactly what you need, and your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time, or your money back, because that's eBay's guaranteed fit, baby. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, you ain't burning cash. With all the parts you need at the price you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home some huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions do apply. An eBay guaranteed fit only available to U.S. customers. Jimmy, I also want to remind everybody to, we're your first listen right here at Locked On Bama, but your second listen should be Locked On College Football Podcast with Spencer McLaughlin. I've been on that show several times. He does an amazing job. He talks transfer portal, NIL, new college football, expanded playoffs, all that stuff. It's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, which is your team every day. So go check out Locked On College Football. Okay. I wanted to go back. Okay. For those who didn't see Saturday, Zach Blackaby of Locked On Auburn and I did a crossover episode, because one thing I think that came up is Auburn is dominating the state of Alabama. I admit it. They're dominating the state of Alabama. I have no problem. I don't like it. I'm with the AHSA Radio Network. You think I like that? I don't. My point was this, and some Auburn fans took offense to it, and I don't think they listened to the podcast. It's not as important as it once was. 30 years ago, it was huge because Alabama's net wasn't as wide. Now it's not quite as big a deal, especially when Alabama's number 2 class. If Alabama had the number 24 class in the country, I'd be panicking. I'd be scared to death. But as it stands, I'm sort of like, okay, yeah, Auburn is dominating a state. I dislike it. I wish it weren't true, but it is true. Meanwhile, Alabama's class is ranked number 2, and I'm not swapping classes. One thing some Auburn people always love to talk about, and Alabama people too, actually, is they talk about the 2008 Alabama class and how Alabama dominated, and they did in state. Now they had the number 3 overall class, by the way. But I look back, I'm pulling it up right now. These are some of the names that were in that class. You of course, you know Julio Jones and Marcel Darius that came from, and Courtney Upshaw that came from the state of Alabama. All those guys went on to have great pro careers, make a ton of money. But here's some other guys from the state of Alabama that year that were in that class. Burton Scott, Glenn Harbin, John Michael Boswell, Michael Williams, who did pretty well. He was good. I mean, he wasn't superstar.
He was good.
Brad Smelly, who, again, good. And I remember him for that 2011 catch in the Iron Bowl. Mark Barron, I should have included him on that first list. He was awesome.
Superstar.
Andrew Billingsley, B.J. Scott, Tyler Love, Brandon Lewis. Again, I don't even know if I'd put it. Ivan Matchett, Jermaine Prayer, Destin Hood.
They didn't show up.
Yeah. I mean, I'm going through, look, then, of course, there's Julio and Jarrell Harris.
Well, multi-year starter.
Kerry Murphy, who I'll include, even though he literally came from Hargrave. He was really an Alabama guy. My point is this. When I look back on that, I'm like, yeah, Alabama dominated state and got everybody they wanted. But a lot of those dudes didn't play out. Let me tell you who else was on that in that signing class. And again, people reference this 2008 as if everybody in that class was from the state of Alabama. Dante Hightower was from that class.
Tennessee.
Robbie Green, who had a decent career at Alabama. He wasn't bad at all.
Louisiana.
Yep. Damian Square played in the pros a long time.
Houston,
really
Texas.
Nice. Yep. Mark Ingram, all he did was win the Heisman.
Michigan.
Yeah. Terrence Cody was in that class.
Mississippi.
Yeah.
Well,
here are 2 names that were in that class that, boy, I can't believe they didn't pan out. Star Jackson and Alonzo Lawrence. But, Corey Smith, who was a punter.
I forgot about him.
Barrett Jones was in that class.
Ooh, Memphis, Tennessee. You can't get any more award-winning. Barrett Jones won every award that exists in college football other than the Heisman.
I'm going to say this. People may think I'm nuts. He may be the most decorated player in college football history. Now,
he's a slam dunk to be in
the
college football hall. He's a slam dunk to be in the college football Hall of Fame because of all those awards that he won.
But I don't know that anybody's won more awards and rings than he did.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Most decorated players of the Saban era and in Alabama history.
Well,
And,
I would say college football history.
College football history, sure. Yeah. About all SEC at 3 different positions. Try that.
Again, you can take any class and sort of spin it the way you want to. My point is this. We talk about that 08 class, and one thing that made that 08 class a little different, everybody calls it the Julio Jones class, which it was.
That's fair.
But if you take just Julio out of that class, all of a sudden the in-state crop was Marcel Darius, great. Robert Lester had a good career. Mark Barron obviously had a good career, but it wasn't like
a couple of them were busts. Like B.J. Scott and Tyler Love were like 5-star type prospects. Jarrell Harris was like a 5-star type prospect and didn't have a 5-star career. Obviously, B.J. Scott and Tyler Love did not have 5-star careers, though they were 5-star prospects.
The state, match it. I remember everybody being excited.
The state doesn't produce the same amount of talent each and every year. I've been around long enough to where I've seen bumper crops, I've seen average crops, and I've seen below average crops, and you never know what you're going to get year to year. But most years you can assume it's average. I think this particular year is average to even below average. But probably I think it's fair to say it's average. But it's not an above average year. It's just average. And, as far as, you and Zach talked about, I know myself the way I don't like looking at it in a big sense. I like looking at it in a micro sense. And by that, I mean, when we say Auburn's out recruiting Alabama in state, and they probably are. Luke acknowledged it, and they probably are. I just don't know why that matters relative to recruiting rankings, which is really all that really matters. And Alabama's 2 and Auburn's 6. But
right.
I look at individual players, and when you say like Auburn didn't beat Alabama for that Smith kid from Thompson, Alabama didn't recruit him really at all. Alabama didn't recruit Eric Winters. And you can say, an Auburn fan, you're like, well, why not? You're stupid for not recruiting. Okay, fine, take that position. But Alabama didn't offer those kids for Alabama reasons. Alabama didn't offer that big defensive end. What's his name? Zion Grady. The new staff didn't offer him. They said, can you come to camp and prove yourself? He didn't come to camp. Eric Winters didn't come to camp. I don't know that Jared Smith has ever been to camp at Alabama. I mean, Alabama didn't recruit those guys. Now, did Auburn beat Alabama for Derek Smith? So far, absolutely they did. I would even say Auburn beat Alabama for Anquan Fagans because Fagans has an Alabama offer and Alabama liked the kid. So that's fair. Okay, Auburn beat us for Fagans. They certainly did for Derek Smith. They may have for others. These younger kids that have committed to Auburn don't even have Alabama offers yet. I mean, Garrett from Gulf Shores and who's a good player. I mean, no doubt he's a good player. Oh, and I love Shad Tootle from Mobile, who's from Cottage Hill Christian, who's committed to Auburn. Alabama had him in camp, and that's somebody Alabama is interested in, but they have not offered him yet. So I'm not – you have to show me kids that Auburn just flat out beat Alabama for, and I'll acknowledge the ones that they did, but guys that Alabama didn't recruit, I don't understand why those are considered wins for Auburn. But if Auburn wants to claim those wins, that's fine.
Now, and here's my point again for the 1,000th time, because one thing that some folks have come at me on Twitter about, and I've just quit responding because they're not listening. They say, "Well, it was important when Saban was dominating. Now it's not important." I was like, "No, what was important was Saban was getting the best everywhere." I mean, yeah, if Alabama had a 5-star, he would try and get them. Now, he didn't get every 5-star, that he wanted, and because he didn't even offer some of the 5-stars. But I'm saying that when Alabama has the number 2 class, and yes, Auburn is dominating in state, I can't refute it, and I don't like it. I'm going to say it again. Me personally, I don't like it. But I also have to say, okay, I can't complain because we have the number 2 class and we got dudes. And so I'm happy with that. And I'm looking at the list now. And again, does it make me throw up in my mouth a little bit to see Auburn down the list? You're dang right it does. So
I mean, do we want fans? I mean, the fans that are so up in arms over this, do y'all want AK Deer or Turbo Rogers?
Yeah.
I mean, which one do y'all want? I mean, in terms, I want the higher rated, higher regarded kid. Now, that's not to say Alabama doesn't have room for both or won't take both, and we'll see what happens. But what I'm saying is, I mean, you take the better player. And I don't consider in-state recruiting in 2024 to be any different than 2008. To me, I just look at the recruiting rankings, as a whole, because they don't divide those up into in-state and out of state. It's just talent acquisition ranking.
Now,
talent acquisition ranking. Right now,
Jimmy,
Alabama's second, Auburn sixth.
And I'm looking
which is great for Auburn, by the way. Congratulations.
It's awesome. Congratulations. I mean, again,
recruiting. They're recruiting extremely well. They're ranked 6th in the country. That's elite as far as I'm concerned.
Listen, I'm going to tell you something. If we weren't, I mean, I know we're 2, so it's fine. But if you had told me 5 months ago that Alabama would have the number 6 class right now, I'd be thrilled to death. Yeah. We're exceeding my expectations. So I got to say Auburn's exceeding my expectations too. Really quickly, I'm looking at the top 10, let's say. Naheem Alford going to Ohio State. That's, probably a lot of NIL.
We tried and failed. Yeah, we tried and failed so far.
Jared Smith, we didn't really recruit. Malik Autry I think Alabama would probably love to have him, but he's from Opelika.
I think Alabama would like to have recruited Malik Autry, but again, there's another kid that never. I don't believe he ever camped at Alabama, and I'm not even sure he has an Alabama offer. But he is a good player. There's no.
He's fantastic.
Okay, he was always going to go to Auburn. I think he's a local.
Jacaleb Falk's brother is on the Auburn team. Eric Winters, Alabama didn't really recruit. Zion Grady, the new staff, really hadn't fallen in love.
Alabama never pushed for Falk. Alabama did. He's got an offer. Alabama never pushed for.
But his brother is on the Auburn team. It's not like the Rogers brothers did it. But I'm saying, okay, then Derek Smith. Hey, we'd love to have it. We'd love to have him back. Jordan Crawford, I don't think Alabama's really pushed for him. Anquan Fagans, you mentioned it. Okay, you can consider it a win if you want to. That's fine.
I'll consider that Auburn beating Alabama.
Sure. Okay.
Fagans.
And Antonio Coleman, they beat us, but
they did beat Alabama for Coleman.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. I mean, I acknowledge all of that, and we still have number 2 class. So, Jimmy, we got to talk about Bama getting into full pads right now. But I want to tell you about FanDuel. FanDuel's the absolute best. It is. I mean, it's the best you can do. When it comes to, just getting a bet in, you love sports. I love sports. We all love them so much we don't want them to stop. But as the playoffs wind down, we get fewer games, right? And the playoffs are pretty much done everywhere. I saw the Little League World Series, but I don't know if I'd count that. And the sports aren't sportsing like I want them to. But FanDuel lets me keep the sports going whenever I want. All I have to do is open the app and dream up bets anytime I'm in the mood. And this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everybody every day all summer long. So head over to FanDuel.com, start making the most of your summer. FanDuel is an official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. All right. Full pads tomorrow, Jimmy. Yeah. Is there going to be like full pads and some actual some hitting and some stuff?
Oh yeah. And
I mean, I don't want full pads. Just we're out here in full pads.
The energy level has been really high, but the energy level goes up in my experience when they put on full pads, especially for the first time. These are football players. They enjoy the contact part of the game. If you don't need to be playing SEC football, or certainly not at Alabama. They enjoy this. Particularly particularly day one, because there'll be some real live hitting. The downside to that is sometimes players get hurt. Alabama's had a pretty, knocking on my laptop here. I think I got wood here. I got some wood down here. Alabama has had some pretty lucky so far with injuries. Xavier Brown's got a little banged up wrist. That's nothing.
That's not a big deal though, right?
That's nothing. Yeah. And as a matter of fact, he might not even have it on tomorrow. I wouldn't be surprised. But Jalen Hale is the only player that is hurt and not practicing. And we all know that because of Jalen Hale's very significant spring injury. He may or may not be back this season, but we're hopeful maybe by the end of the year, maybe. But regardless of that, Alabama's been very healthy. That can change once the pads start because here comes the hitting and here comes the serious contact. And there will be, I'm sure, some and like I said, the practice is divided into periods. They're going to scrimmage a couple of those periods. There'll be full 11 on 11 with hitting scrimmages. Now, I think sometimes most teams, and probably Alabama, tries not to tackle to the ground because a lot of injuries happen down there. So Alabama's just kind of hitting hard. I think Nick Saban referred to it as thud practices. I'm sure that's probably what Alabama's going to do because most schools do that. They don't tackle on the ground. The NFL, for people who don't know, they don't hit at all during the week. I think people will be stunned at how not physical NFL practices are once the games start, because they would lose everybody. They're just not big enough rosters to handle.
Well, I mean, that would be like
time.
that would be like just bags of money out there getting hit, and when they explode, the coins go everywhere. That's why they don't do it.
That's exactly right.
They're like, when you hit my bag of money, my money goes everywhere. So don't do that.
Yeah, you don't want, Ray Lewis hitting you every day. You wouldn't live. But so anyway, but it is going to be exciting because I'm expecting an even higher energy level. It's hard to believe, but it's going to happen. It's real football. I mean, what we've been seeing so far is drills. I had a guy texting me today. I was a little frustrated over, come on, give me something really good, that's happened. I'm like, it's kind of hard when all you're really watching is the quarterback throwing to a receiver who's running a route, who's uncovered by a defensive back. There's no pass rush. There's not even a snap. It's just the quarterback throwing to a receiver who's running a route. Now, they are running the routes at full speed and throwing the football down the field. And again, these are all important drills that they drill into these guys to create muscle memory. But, it's not real football. It becomes a lot closer to real football when they put those pads on Tuesday.
All right, that's going to do it for today's podcast. We'll be back tomorrow with more. Until then, roll tide, everybody.
Roll Tide.